Hey there, gang. All right, let's work over exercise 4.2, I think that was week 6, I think, yeah. So let me just jump in, okay? What you should do is pull up your exercise and compare what you did with what I'm going to show you. As usual, the way I do it is not necessarily the only way, but you want to check your way against mine to see if you're on the right track, okay? So, in recent years, the existence of differences in interpretation about the meaning of the discovery of America has led to a reassessment of Columbus's place in Western history. So, the problem here is who's doing the different interpreting? We need a subject, so I suggested as historians. So, when we do that, then we can change interpretation to interpret. So, again, we're changing a noun to a verb. Have interpreted, and so that makes it much more we have somebody doing something, historians doing something, interpreting. So in recent years, as historians have interpreted the discovery of America in different ways, and then likewise, instead of saying has led to a reassessment, we can turn reassessment into reassess, because now we have a subject which we can repeat as they, which is the historians, and so we get in recent years, as historians have interpreted the history of America, the discovery of America in different ways, they have reassessed Columbus's place in Western history. Yeah, okay. So, and then I came up with a different one. Recently, historians, instead of saying as, I tried just running it without that. Historians have interpreted in different ways what it means to discover America, okay. And so, they have reassessed Columbus. So it's just instead of saying as and then going to that, I decided to start with the historians and then say and so. The and so kind of means the same thing as, but I flipped it, if you will. So there's a couple ways to do that. I mean, there's obviously more than that. But again, the main thing is to try to get our players in there. So here, if we look at this one, tracing the transitions in a book or a well-known article will provide assistance in efforts at improving coherence and prose. Again, let's get somebody in there. Let's get a human being in there, right? So this is, I know you've been told not to start with you, or not to use the word you, but in how to, if you're trying to explain to somebody how to do something, and there's a lot of other reasons that you is perfectly acceptable. So for me, if you trace, so now we've got our character, it's you, the reader, if you will, and we turn tracing into trace. So we've got a real strong you trace now. So now we've got our subject and our verb, a human subject, and then the ing goes to the verb. If you trace the transitions in a book or well-written article, you will improve. So will provide assistance. So I really went to town on this. Will provide assistance in efforts at improving. I got all that and boiled it down to you will improve. Okay, so this is very wordy, way much to stuff. You will improve the coherence of your. So notice how much clearer that is. And if you trace the transitions in a book or well-written article, you will improve the coherence of your prose. And then I decided to go ahead and try it a different way. And I left the tracing as the subject, okay? And then just changed will provide assistance in the efforts at improving, all that nonsense, to will help you improve, okay? So again, though I started with kind of an abstract subject, I turned it into will help you improve the coherence of your, so I still got a subject in there. Yeah, so okay. All right, let's go to the next one. Notice how almost always the rewrite is shorter than the original, and that's good. You know, usually if you can say the same thing more clearly in fewer words, your reader is going to be happy. As reported in recent media stories, resistance has been growing against building new mental health facilities in residential areas because of a distrust founded on the belief that the few examples of improper management are typical. There is a need for modification of these perceptions. That's rough, but we do have to try to figure out what it means, right? And what it means is something like, you know, people don't want mental health facilities, and they don't want them because they've heard on the media examples of how these are improperly managed. But so they think that's how they all are. But they're not all that way, and so we need to let people know that most mental health facilities are managed perfectly well and do not constitute a threat, right? So your first job whenever you're working on a sentence is to make sure that the new sentence means what you want it to mean, and that you know what the old sentence means. Now, sometimes when you're working on your own writing, you'll find that once you start thinking about your sentence, you'll see maybe it doesn't mean, you're not sure what it means, and so then that leads to really actually working out your thinking. So often editing sometimes we talk about this as if everything happens in an order. First you do the content, then you do the organization, and then you edit your sentences. But very often, working at a certain point on improving the precision or clarity of your sentences forces you to improve your thinking too, because then you discover the sentences don't necessarily always say a whole lot, or they're contradictory or something like that. So anyway, okay, so let's get into it. As reported in recent media stories. Okay, so let's put the media into the subject position, right? And now reported, let's make that our verb. So as the media have reported, so we got that, turns into that there. And now let's get to homeowners. Resistance has been growing, but it doesn't say who, right? So here's a case where you got to make up your character, and I think I did this for you. So I put homeowners. And then instead of saying, what would it say, resistance has been growing against, we now say, so this resistance, which is a nominalization, we use instead that nice strong verb, resist. Homeowners have begun to resist the building of new mental health facilities in their neighborhoods. And notice how I changed that even. Like, I just thought, come on, let's make this straightforward. So I did change quite a bit in residential areas. I said in their neighborhoods. Because, and now instead of a distrust, let's say, you know what, I didn't really get that trust in there. Yeah, I lost that. Because we can see what we did. I'll think about whether I can get distrust in there. Because they founded on distrust founded on belief. And what we learn when we think about this is that's a false belief. So I decided to say that. They falsely believe that the few examples of improperly managed facilities are typical. So I had to do some real work on that one, right? And then there is a need for a modification of these perceptions. Well, here, again, we don't have a person whose perceptions need to be changed. We don't say. So, now we have our homeowners in the sentence, right? So now we can just say, instead of saying there is a need for, let's just say we need. Okay, so a need becomes need. I mean, the verb need, and we put our subject in there. We need. Okay, so there we bring in we as a subject into the writing. We need to change their perceptions. I mean, that's so much more direct, right, and clear that there is a need for a modification. And we know whose perceptions they are. They're their perceptions, and those people are the homeowners. If you're worried that the reader might still not sure who there is there, because we've also had media and neighborhoods and facilities, that's fine. Then you go ahead and put it in. It's always, if your reader can't be sure who a pronoun is referring to, then just go ahead and repeat it, and then there's no problem. So there, we need to change homeowners' perceptions, and I put that apostrophe after the S because it's plural and possessive. That's why I did it like that. Okay, and yeah, I'm not gonna. I feel like I didn't get the distrust because. Yeah, it seems like I get the idea without using the word distrust. I'm sure there's a way to do that because they distrust managers. There's a lot involved there, so it might take a whole other sentence or something. Anyway, so that's not a perfect job I did because I or maybe not because I didn't get distrust in there. But I do think that this says what this says, for more or less. Okay, 4 of concern is the increasing cost of protecting museum artifacts. Already you can see we don't know concern to who, so we already see the problem there. Their mere storage is a contributing factor to deterioration, to say nothing of the effects of their display. Whoops, that's probably supposed to be a period, I don't know. The concept of conservation means that higher expenditures are necessary to ensure the availability of skills and equipment to ensure their preservation And people do write like this, and it's why you don't like to read this kind of stuff. We don't like to read this kind of crap because it's really hard to get through. So what we go ahead and do, let's get our characters. So now, well, let's decide who we're concerned about. Who's concerned? It seems like this is aimed at museum people, so I'm just going to make our subject museums, museums, and then instead of saying of concern, we can say are concerned. So now we've got our subject and a verb. Museums are concerned. We do, by the way, in case you think there's always subjects and verbs in sentences. Actually, in this case, the subject is, if we look up here, it's the increasing cost is of concern, the increasing cost of protection. So there's actually our subject, and our verb is. Well, notice our subject is now something is like cost, which is not very exciting, and is the most boring little tiny verb in the English language. But now we have, we could say museum curators. Let's say that might be, if you want to make it even more human, we can do that. Let's make it museum curators. Okay, there are concerned about the increasing cost of protecting artifacts. The artifacts deteriorate. Instead of saying deterioration, let's just say they deteriorate. So there again, we get our strong verb, and now we have a clear subject. The artifacts deteriorate, whether displayed or stored. To preserve these treasures for future generations, we, and what I want to assume here is, what I'm assuming is that the writer is maybe a curator, him or herself, and he's writing to other museum people, right? So we would be perfectly appropriate in that context. So see, you have to, in order to do the exercise, I had to invent the context, the audience, the writer, who they might be, and that helps us solve the problem as well. We must spend, as opposed to what? That higher expenditures are necessary. So I took higher expenditures are necessary, and I turned that into we must spend. So it's really just turning things into plain language, isn't it? But believe it or not, it's hard to write that way. More for skilled personnel and advanced equipment. And again, notice how to ensure the availability of skills. Whose skills? And what kind of equipment. So I did a lot of work on that. And look at this. This one's 3.5 pages, lines long, and when I revised it, I got it down to about 2.5. And then I messed up on the bonus. One of my bonuses was, or it's not a bonus, it was just extra, but was the same. So, but this one was different. So, with the decline in network television viewing in favor of cable and rental cassettes, awareness is growing. Again, whose awareness is growing at the networks of change, growing at the networks of changes in tastes and viewing habits, resulting in a need to change programming accordingly. See, when you don't put characters in the fronts of your sentences, you just tangle yourself in knots. Look at this, growing at the networks of changes. Awareness is growing at the network of change. Like you have to read that 3 times to even figure out what it means. What you could do to make it even, you could say awareness of changes is growing at the networks. I mean, even if we didn't really go to town on it, we could at least do this, move this over here. Awareness of changes is growing. Oh, well, what is it? Oh, yeah, I see the problem because this goes with that. So what would happen if we did that? Awareness of changes in taste and viewing habits is growing into network. I guess you could do that, but again, it's still a mess. Resulting in a need to change programming accordingly. Like, we don't even need that freaking word. Just get it out of there because it means the same thing as resulting in. Anyway, so we go down here and we put our character in. As viewers, watch less TV. What do they have up here? Television viewing. So I don't want to say as viewers view, so I went I have to come up with another word. So as viewers watch, the most common word we use, right? Go for the common stuff. As viewers watch less network television and more cable and rental cassettes, that even there could maybe be worked on. The networks, and again, now let's go ahead and put our character in there. Instead of here, notice at the networks is way over here. Well, let's make them the character. Are becoming aware. That's still kind of, there's probably some better verb I could use there, but there's my verb now. Are becoming aware that that programming, and then again, that there is a need to change programming. So let's go ahead and make programming the subject, and then our verb becomes needs to change. So, and again, you can see it's a little bit shorter, and it's way more direct. As viewers watch less